The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host, content creators, or the production company.
Welcome to the Foundations of Freedom with Jerome Huyler. A strong, vigorous economy runs on a division of labor. While some produce the goods, others provide the services we, the people, need and want. But behind everything we do, our work, our businesses, our daily lives, are the political decisions our leaders make in our name. Since we elect the men and women who write the laws that create the conditions in which we all prosper or perish, we all need to be fully informed political participants. The silent majority can no longer afford to remain silent. One of the most valuable services a free people require is the clarification of complex social, economic, and political ideas. Other media platforms offer biting commentary on the hot-button headlines of the day. This podcast service will explore the underlying causes of and the effective cures for what ails us. And this nation is ailing. Ultimately, to preserve the American dream, we will have to retrieve the principles that made that dream possible. But there are more pressing issues and concrete decisions to consider. So please stay tuned.
Struggling to get local leads? Your Google business profile could be holding you back. For just $150, we will fix your listing, boost your reviews, and deliver a 30-day action plan, all in under 1 hour. Be the first business customers find, not your competitor. Ready for more calls, more clicks, and more customers? Book your local SEO jumpstart today at setupshoponline.com or call 201-757-0134 now.
Welcome again to episode 12 of the Foundations of Freedom with Jerome Huyler. Today's episode is titled The American Dream, How America Got Great. In our last discussion, we explored how America earned its reputation as a moral and generous nation. Today, we trace the roots of that greatness to their source. What made America great in the first place? Let's take a closer look at how the American dream came to be and what we must do to preserve it. In episode 9, Dr. Huyler urged Americans to think about the goodness that America's greatness begot. Against the country's many detractors, he observed that Americans, the freest and most prosperous, are the most generous and caring people to ever people the planet. In this episode, Jerome will discuss exactly what it was that enabled America to become great in the first place. This then is the story of America's journey to greatness, often called American exceptionalism. And it is how the American dream came to be. What do you say, Jerry?
Rod, first we have to unpack the very idea of greatness. Andrew Cuomo, pushing back against Donald Trump's Make American Great campaign, insisted, quote, "We're not going to make America great again. It was never that great," unquote. Well, was America ever great? Is America great today? The trick is in deciding by what standard we are to decide the question. To say something is or isn't good or great is to make a value judgment.
That raises the whole fact-value controversy. In college, we were taught that facts are not values, and values are not facts. So the professor said where values are concerned, there are no objective truths, there are no universal principles. So having a value is just stating one's own opinion, right? One person's opinion is this true or right or moral, or is there any other person's opinion, right? So there's no telling what anyone may choose to value or disvalue.
My college professor spilled the same dribble. Technically, it is called subjectivism. Believers in subjectivism insist there are no objective truths, just subjective opinions. Fortunately, that's not true. It's just another opinion. Let's see if we can't derive a set of values from absolute objective facts. Value judgments begin with values. Using Ayn Rand's definition and analysis, we can say a value is that which one acts to gain and or keep. That brings up the question, what is good for us? What should we seek to gain and or keep? Does it make a difference what we value? What should we seek to avoid? The critical question is this: by what standard are we to judge what is good or bad for us? Ayn Rand ingeniously gave us the answer. Religious scruples aside, the standard by which any action or disposition can be judged good or bad is life itself. That which extends and preserves life is the good. That which shortens or threatens life is the evil. Where there is no life, there can be no values. Nothing is or isn't of value to sand, to rocks, or the man in the moon. The simple and enduring truth that has eluded nearly every Western thinker from the beginning of time, with very rare exceptions, is this: on what do our lives depend? In a word, freedom. We all have needs that must be satisfied, and the same needs as that, being human. And we each have capacities for satisfying those needs. To survive, we all must be free to use our capacities to satisfy our needs. We need food every day. We need shelter from nature's often brutal elements. We need to feel safe in our communities. We need an income that allows us to procure the many things that sustain life and make life worth living. That means we need a trade, profession, or other career. We need to know we are able to provide the comforts and conveniences that make life easier and easier year by year. We need to feel productive and proud of how we are living our lives. We need the confidence that we can make the right, the pro-life decisions and not continually get ourselves deeper in debt, deeper in trouble, or create the problems that we need to solve. That country is greatest that steadily improves the conditions of daily life and that keeps human liberation, human freedom from political bondage. Despotisms, fascism, communism, totalitarianism of any stripe is the worst arrangement as far as living our lives is concerned. Thus, we can say that a country is as great as it is free. Freedom is simply the ability to think, say, and do as we please. There really is only one restriction. All of us being equally free, no one may, quote, harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. That was John Locke's formulation, the 17th century philosopher. It is the sense in which, quote, all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. That, of course, is Thomas Jefferson reprising Locke in the Declaration of Independence. A truly free country allows people to simply live and let live. From the country's earliest days, that has been the American creed.
So, how does freedom contribute then to human well-being? And how does it improve the conditions of daily life for all? What does it make possible?
Freedom leaves millions of men and women free to invent, innovate, produce, and market the many life-saving, labor-saving goods and services that are able to bring comfort, safety, and convenience to our daily lives. That is the sheer, undeniable common sense of the matter. Freedom is what makes prosperity possible. And prosperity is both the material expression of a nation's greatness and its greatest practical reward. America, the freest nation ever to exist, became the greatest and most prosperous. Now, a nation of individuals mostly pursuing their personal aspirations must have expectations. And what Americans could expect is something no former society or civilization had managed to offer. Quote, a steady improvement in the conditions of daily life, unquote. For most of mankind's history, and in much of today's world, life has been a tragic affair with little hope for improvement. Untold generations labored from sunup to sundown merely to provide themselves with life's bare necessities. Luxury and comfort were available now and again, but only for a very few, the rulers, the thieving rich, privileged aristocrats, or armed banditti. Oppression and subjugation at the hands of neighboring armies, invading barbarians, roving bands of heartless thugs. That is what pockmarks every page of history's unforgiving calendar. Nor is this just so many pages torn from ancient times. The past century saw a level of barbarism and a toll of slaughtered innocents unmatched in the annals of human malice. And, quote, there but for fortune go you and I, unquote. In America, change was the only constant. And to an unprecedented degree, though not for all, it pointed in a single happy direction, up, straight up. The American experience is like any other in its capacity to dramatically transform and improve the conditions of daily life. In its most immediate sense, improvement measures the progress civilization make in coping with nature's unavoidable threats. That is, her storms and tempests, seasonal extremes of heat and cold, illness, criminal contagions, foreign invasions, sanitary hazards, and especially scarcity. That is, a paucity of the resources on which human life depends. For most of mankind's history, living conditions ranged from harsh to horrific. A young and self-confident America resolved to be stagnant no more.
How much did the conditions of life then improve in America over time? And can you fill in some of the historical details? How did human ingenuity and people's productive efforts pay off for this, the freest and the most prosperous of nations?
Generations ago, Americans decided that the future could be far better than the present, just as the present was a vast improvement over the past. The coming Industrial Revolution held the key. Down through the decades, clever tinkerers, inventors, mechanics, engineers, and scientists came up with innovative materials, processes, and gadgets. They used reason to make the conditions of life easier and easier. The steady introduction of life-saving, labor-saving products meant a steady release from the toil and drudgery that had consumed most prior civilizations. The most important innovation that made improvement possible, and indeed accelerated its progress, was the advent of mass production. Grandparents looked with astonishment as their children and grandchildren brought home furnishings and appliances, comforts and conveniences, the likes of which those grandparents could not have afforded or even imagined in their youth. Consider how different living conditions would be had the following not been invented, patented, and brought to market: the wood-burning stove or elegant fireplace, the water heater, factory fan, room air conditioner, or central climate control system, indoor plumbing, bicycles and baby carriages, mass-produced furniture, off-the-rack clothing, and affordable machine-made footwear. We should probably throw in toothpaste, deodorant, shampoo, hairspray, and mouthwash. Just imagine what it had to feel like in the days and years after one's neighborhood was first wired for electricity. Edison's incandescent lamps could be installed not just on every street corner, turning night to light for the first time in history, but in every room of one's home or tenement flat. Then came the major labor-saving appliances that ran off it. Example, the refrigerator, clothes washer, a little later the clothes dryer, dishwasher, toaster oven, microwave, air fryer, and coffee maker. Families could now enjoy so many boredom-busting amusements like the rotary telephone, record player, radio, TV, upright piano, and laptop computer. Next came battery-powered devices, from handheld transistor radios to tablets to the ubiquitous smartphone that just about does it all, with apps for work and play. Once the modern supermarket came along, families can sit down and eat a meal in minutes when it was not a quick trip to the fast food joint on the corner. In earlier periods, it was a full day of daunting toil to put a meal on the family table each night. So many wondrous things to work for, save for, And with the invention of the mail order catalog and Amazon.com, send for. And somewhere along the way, some creative soul decided that more expensive items, sewing machines, upright pianos, and automobiles could be happily purchased on time. Then came the checking account, the bank and credit and debit card, PayPal, and all the innovative modes of conducting commercial transactions yet to come. Not everyone in the world enjoys these comforts and conveniences. They should not be taken for granted or lost to those who will come after us. One invention in particular is worth a special mention. Nearly nothing said middle class or so changed the American landscape as the family automobile, at least by the time Henry Ford came on the scene. There were cars and automakers before Ford, but what they offered could be afforded by only a very few. By synchronizing the attachment of a diverse range of component parts to an automobile chassis, moving along an assembly line, Ford could put out a car in far less time and at far less cost than any competitor. Ford introduced his affordable, reliable Model T in 1913. A decade later, an automobile was rolling off a Ford assembly line every 90 minutes. The vehicle could be purchased for $290, paid in full, with unlimited freedom thrown in at no extra cost. By 1908, there were 9,000 cars trudging along America's weather-tossed roads. By 1913, the year Ford christened his assembly line, that grew to 1 million. The next 10 years saw a tenfold increase, and by 1927, surveys counted 26 million automobiles on America's streets and highways, one for every 5 living Americans. By 1960, 60% of American households owned their own automobiles, 62% owned their own homes, and 70% enjoyed television in their own living rooms nightly. America's middle class spends about $40 billion annually just to care for their lawns. Yet all Henry Ford did was ingeniously adopt a prior innovation, interchangeable parts. A century earlier, Eli Whitney realized by separately fashioning so many locks, stocks, and barrels, then assembling them, which was Adam Smith's idea of a division of labor, Whitney could dramatically decrease the time and the cost of manufacturing an item with great consumer appeal, the long-barreled musket. By century's end, Irving Singer's precision parts became the pedal-powered sewing machines that added hours of leisure to a housewife's day. Singer's innovative on-time purchasing arrangement allowed families across America to bring the sewing machine home in short order. This represented the mechanization of housework that would liberate successive generations of housewives from hours and hours of day after day drudgery and toil. Henry Ford put America on wheels. In the bargain, he created not just new jobs, but entirely new industries. Ford would need steel, glass, rubber, leather, eventually vinyl coverings and plastics, metal fabrication plants, and assembly facilities. These had to be furnished by other men working in so many construction trades. All kinds of materials would have to be produced and shipped to Detroit's automotive sites. So additional trucks and thousands of truck drivers would be needed to bring them there. Families opened filling stations and tankers delivered the new cleaner burning fuel, gasoline, not kerosene, to every point on the map. Workers would have to eat or visit a watering hole where everybody knew their name. Thus, restaurants and bars could flourish, requiring an even larger workforce. Franchise chains and pricey advertising campaigns stoked employment roles further. The national economy grew by leaps and bounds. This is just what a robust, supply side driven free market looks like, often denigrated by capitalism's critics as trickle down. This approach actually works every time it is tried, like the widening waves of good fortune resulting from Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Elon Musk's enterprising labors in our own time. Men happily found work in an explosion of new and expanding occupations and enterprises. Thus did industrialization lead to the mass production of three additional Yankee innovations. One, a middle class. Two, suburban life. And three, leisure time. Well-to-do families had been moving to the suburbs since before the Civil War. Streetcars and steam locomotives made commuting to work possible. But it was the automobile that triggered the widespread move to idyllic village settings all across America. In the years following World War II, the country rapidly grew closer to the city. The chance to leave the grime, crime, and frantic pace of urban life and settle down in safe and open spaces appealed to millions. America was transformed into a land of lawns. Within a single generation, the joys and blessings of suburban life crossed the North American continent. Close enough to the city to obtain gainful employment and pay one's bills, but living in one's own home, surrounded by manicured lawns and country all around. What was there not to love? The price may have been the daily commute, but Americans loved their cars or could find lots to do on the train rides to and fro. Today's America's suburbs are filled to overflowing with a middle class made up of police officers, sanitation workers, doctors, dentists, floor finishers, pipe fitters, teachers, tailors, lawyers, and long-haul truck drivers. Suburban life, in large part, was made possible by the ingenious application of industrial processes to the task of home construction itself. Abraham Levitt and his sons have been called the Henry Fords of housing, turning the building process into a stationary assembly line by 1948. The Levitts were mass producing lovely humble abodes across Long Island, New York, completing 35 houses a day in 1948. By the 1960s, the Levitts were framing and finishing a house every 15 minutes. They would eventually put 140,000 units on the market as builders copied their construction practices all over the country. For an ever expanding middle class, items considered luxuries for one generation became absolute necessities for the next. And the devices that saved labor also saved time. A golden age of leisure was born. American families enjoyed more leisure time than any other people were privileged to possess. Family outings, long summer vacations in the mountains or on the seashore, and specialty camps for the kids grew in popularity. There would be time for spectator sports and participation as Boy Girl Scout leaders or Little League coaches and referees proliferated. There was time to attend the local circus or concert performance, art or auto auction, or sign up for dance lessons, show up for Friday night card games, or just go to an opening night movie. Needless to say, not everyone arrived in rags or rose to riches, but in this golden land of opportunity, upward mobility was like low-hanging fruit, right there for the picking. We dubbed it the American dream. There were notable interruptions, periodic financial panics when the economy would plunge. In the ensuing years, fear and hardship could spread. Progress would come to a grinding halt. The housing bubble that burst in September 2008 was but the latest in a long line of such calamities. Each such event certainly demands closer scrutiny, but these dislocations do not detract from the long-term glide path by the late 20th century made life so much freer, safer, and more comfortable than it had ever been before. It goes without saying that values worth gaining are worth keeping, but to be kept, they first must be explicitly identified and appreciated. Above all, men must understand what made their first appearance possible. Improvement was a value worth gaining and is well worth keeping. A firm attachment to the principle produced the highest standard of living ever recorded and brought ever greater levels of comfort to a remarkably free, diverse, and inventive people. Is what American exceptionalism promised, and for the better part of the nation's history, incontrovertibly delivered. It is what Americans, until very recently, were able to take for granted, and now, sadly, wish they could enjoy more of as problems and controversies mount.
But what exactly is it that needs to be recovered? And what is it that made the original achievement possible? How are we to retrieve the wonderful range of opportunities earlier generations were able to enjoy?
The obvious answer would have us shrinking the size, expense, and intrusiveness of government and dramatically lowering taxes. A family that is paying upwards of 50% in combined federal, state, local income taxes, property, payroll, sales, social security, estate, utility, and capital gains taxes is already half slave, half free. If life has become unaffordable for many a family, it's due to the burden of taxes they bear, burdensome regulations placed on business, permitting mandates that government has piled on business in recent times is another steep impediment to production and economic growth. It's high time we got government out of our pockets and off of our backs. What will happen to those few in any generation who can't make it on their own? I say to the viewers, you are free to revisit episode 9, which covers the goodness that American greatness begot. Again, I want to thank all of our viewers for standing by and absorbing the content of this episode 12. And I would recommend, if you want any further discussion of these issues, I recommend my book, Everything You Have, subtitled The Case Against Welfare. It explains why what we need to preserve both freedom and our prosperity is to make government what it was originally intended to be, a protector, not a provider. All of this discussion, in fact, comes from material that was first presented in that book. By the way, the title of the book, Everything You Have, comes from admonition Gerald Ford gave the country back in 1976 when he said, a government that is big enough to give you anything you want is big enough to take everything you have. I entitled the book, Everything You Have, subtitled The Case Against Welfare. Thank you very much for listening, staying tuned, and keep coming back. There are plenty more episodes to follow. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Jerry. As always, this was a great episode. For anyone that wants to find that book, you can find it on Amazon. The link's in our resources section. And also, if you'd like to connect with Jerry, you could find him on LinkedIn or Quora. Again, those links will be in the resources section. Send him a message, connect with him via email, phone, and maybe you want to be a guest on this podcast, by all means. So if you've made it this far, thank you. Don't let this be where your journey ends, as I say. As I've said many times before, let this be where it begins. If this episode helped connect the dots for you, share it, post it on your social media, email it to a friend. Get people thinking again about what made America the greatest and freest nation on earth and what we must do to protect it. Next, take action. Start by reaching out to your local state and federal representatives. Tell them how you feel about, for example, rising taxes, growing government control, the loss of economic freedom, or whatever it is that you feel is an issue that needs to be taken care of. Now, we've made it easy. Download a pre-written letter. Go to Dr. Huyler's link tree. We made it super easy. Download the pre-written letter. Make your voice heard. You'll find all the links at the end of the show. And if you want to go deeper, like I said, go to Amazon, get Dr. Huyler's books. There's more than one book there. They're essential reading for anyone serious about liberty, limited government, and American exceptionalism. So subscribe to the Foundations of Freedom podcast on our YouTube channel, on Rumble, connect with Dr. Huyler on Quora, on LinkedIn, go to the link tree. You'll find a ton of other resources, other videos, all the other episodes, previous episodes. America doesn't need to be remade. It needs to be remembered. Thank you. See you next time.